Welcome to Distribution Talk with Jason Bader, the show where we dive into the stories, struggles, and solutions from business owners and thought leaders in the wholesale distribution market. Hi friends, Jason here. In this episode, I had the opportunity to catch up with Andrew Hartman, president of Hartman Independent Company based in Canonsburg, Pennsylvania. Andrew's company is a distributor serving the packaging, industrial, and construction markets. One of the things I love about his leadership style is the ability to remain open to new ideas and recognize that he doesn't have to know everything. A great deal of his success comes from his ability to step back and let others share the spotlight. Humility, communication, and respect are the very principles that will guide Hartman Independent long into the future. I enjoyed my conversation with Andrew, and I hope you do too. Well, hey, Andrew, welcome to Distribution Talk. Thanks for taking the time to be with me today.
Thanks for having me, Jason. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I like to do in the show, as you know, I like to go back and find out a little bit about your history and how you got involved in distribution and jumping in the family business and all of that kind of stuff. So please, would you share with us?
For sure. Yeah. So third generation in my business, we go back to the 1940s. We come out of the end of World War II with my grandfather being exposed to a lot of different technologies, bringing that back from some military service into civilian service, coming from the West Coast back to Pittsburgh, and then establishing distribution. At that point, you had a lot of guys coming home from the war. Home building was changing, and he kind of got in on that rising tide. So through the early days of our business, he focused primarily in the fastening space, nailing and stapling, the residential construction world. And like so many of his generation, he started in his garage and drove all over the place, delivering out of the back of his car. And it grew from there. In the early 50s, we were able to acquire a building in downtown Pittsburgh on the north side of the city. And we were there for, I think, almost 40 years before we transitioned back to the suburbs. But the business grew up. My dad came into the business in 1970, stayed, and is still in the business now, just not in an ownership capacity. And then I have obviously grown up around the business, went to school not planning on joining the business, but then as life tends to have twists and turns, that became more and more attractive. And so in 2002, I joined the business upon graduating from college, and then I've been here ever since. So that's the nutshell. We can dive into pieces of that if you'd like, but that's the picture.
Of course, and it is fascinating, how so many of these construction supply, staff-related business, I think in a lot of distribution in general, came early on, World War II, and then coming in and trying to find, these opportunities. And it really was kind of the golden age of beginning these supply houses. And boy, I know so many different companies that's really got where the start came from. Now, many of them didn't make it to your generation, but
that's true.
Yeah. And definitely, that's rarefied, the rarefied place, because really those generational businesses, I think a third of them make it to second generation and a third of those make it to the next generation after that. And, it's tough. And who knows, you might even make it to that fourth generation. You never know.
You never know. There's a chance. I have 4 children, so they've got,
you got 4 chances there.
There's a high probability. Yeah, I think the statistics are even worse than that. I want to say 90% of family businesses fail in my generation.
Interesting.
It's the third generation that is cursed.
So you're the killers. Yeah, you're killers.
Typically, we're the killers.
And
then if you get to the fourth, it's even worse. I want to say it's 96% that make it to the fourth generation and in that time. So
yeah. It is interesting. I went to a family business seminar years and years ago with the old Arthur Anderson Company. Mm-hmm. They had a Center for Family Business, and so my family and I went to this thing, and it was shocking, listening to some of these statistics, but seeing some of these family businesses, and really there were rules put in place, in order to make it to the next generation. Some of the really, really old ones like Beretta handguns, and, that's a 9th generation or 10th generation. But, these rules were put into place, and they're not really PC friendly, rules. It was the,
for sure.
First boy, took over the family business, and that was the way it was. And so, yeah, definitely interesting, but interesting learning about that family business dynamic. And I'm such a fan of family businesses. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful deal.
Yeah, they have they have their pros and their cons, their blessings and their challenges. I think the fact that I can still go down the hallway and see my dad on a day-to-day basis, that's a blessing. As he ages and as I age, those times become more precious. If we're in the moment, if we're living in the moment and we see them for what they are and not for their challenges, which is, hey, I know this guy and I know how he's going to react to this and that and the other thing.
Sure.
But truly treasure them for what they are. I think you can't ever get that back. And to see it in the moment, and I struggle sometimes, but I try to see it in the moment. It's a powerful thing.
Oh yeah, I mean, working with my my father, there was definitely those struggle moments, those points of challenge, and I think that's actually very healthy. Is that there's points of challenge because the company would be very stagnant if you didn't have those differences of opinion and being able to share those in a healthy manner. Sometimes those aren't always as healthy as they probably could be, but well, no, I would agree with you that is something. And leaving that family business, it was something that I did miss a little bit, that interaction. But I tell you, we're a whole lot more civil to one another, now that we don't work together any longer. So going back to your story of saying that you weren't necessarily thinking you were going to go into the family business. What was the decision point? What was that change in decision that you said, what, maybe the family business isn't as bad as I thought it might be?
Yeah, boy, I'm not sure that's a single moment in time. I tend to think that's a progressive answer or like so many things, little journey of discovery. For me, it was seeing the time commitment that was ahead of me in a pre-medical studies journey. I had gone into college thinking I was going to be a large animal veterinarian and pursue the medical world. And I started dating my wife and we were pretty serious and some priorities started to change. One of the things that is attractive about family business when it's well run is that it's stable and it creates a very good platform to build a life upon. And so that became more and more attractive. So I think it was a reshuffling of priorities, a reshuffling of, not necessarily reshuffling of dreams, if you will, but some perspective, some focus. And it wasn't like it was just handed to me on a silver platter.
Right.
I had, as a kid, 14, 15, 16-year-old through high school and then all through college, I'd worked in the repair shop and worked in the warehouse and cut the grass at the business and done all those things. So I'd been around it, I'd seen it, I'd worked in it, but nothing of substance. And so when I started to have that shift of thinking and I went back to my dad and said, hey, this is starting to sound a little more like something I want to know more about, I actually had to apply to the company where I was working part-time for a full-time position. And you know what? That was one of the better things that I think that my dad made me do.
Right.
Because I now sat down with the managers where I reported to them in a part-time capacity as someone who was now coming to them saying, I want to be part of the team that's running this business. And that was a great little speed bump that was purposely put in my way. And so that made it seem more realistic. It made it seem more like I was trying to get a real job versus just having the keys of the kingdom handed to me. And it's been like that way every step of the way. And I think that's important. I think if you're raised or if you come into the business with the wrong perspective, that can lead to challenges. I had to work my way in, so to speak. And that was good. That was a really good thing. But it was really life. It was my desire to get married, to start a family, to create a stable base. And then I can't discount the fact that I knew that I was investing in something that had a future. And so right from the beginning, I knew I was putting in the layers that were going to lead to something. And here I am now, 20 years later.
Right. It's interesting. I just started thinking a little bit about that attitude coming into a company and maybe going back to our comments about, these businesses failing in these generations. And I think a lot of it does come back to perspective and to maybe core values, honestly, coming into these.
That's a great point.
If you come in highly entitled, thinking you're just going to, get that handed to you on a silver platter, good chance that you're probably not going to have the humility to really thrive in that long term. I mean, and that just kind of dawned on me really thinking about this.
Yeah. Humility. It's interesting you use that word. Humility is a word that as a 22-year-old doesn't resonate, but
no, not very much. No.
As a 40-year-old, you become very, very aware of the need for humility, but just that ability to see the world as more than yourself and to
Yeah.
see the business as way more than yourself. It's critical. And I think you are onto a thread there that if family businesses want to go into multi-generational success, teaching humility would really be a high recommended.
I agree. And it's so interesting. My younger brother and I were pretty close, and, he runs the family business, and he took that over and has been highly successful once he cut the debt. But he shared with me years ago, his favorite definition of humility. It's always stuck with me. It's the ability to remain teachable. And I really thought about it. And I think that, again, going in, you're right, with that type of mentality, I think you get a fair shot at actually, showing, actually being present for a long time. And really, I think it's also being curious about your company and curious about the people around you as well. So I think that you're right. Humility really encompasses quite a bit of the ability to be successful in these businesses.
Yeah, it kind of, to me, it goes hand in hand with a saying about leadership that I like, and that is, to be a great leader, you have to first be able to be led. That's not possible if you're not teachable, like you said, and if you're not, I think nobody likes to claim to be humble because then they'll be challenged in that. But if you're not humble and you're not able to be led, then you can't in turn lead. And
I think, there's a perception that being humble is less than. You're being subservient to or less than. And that's an uncomfortable position, especially for a younger, that 20-year-old self, thinking about that as you get older, it's comforting sometimes, to that ability to be, that you don't have to always have the answers, that it's okay to have something else that can lead you and guide you,
I agree.
And, whether that's a physical person or not, that's I think that is a very interesting point on this. It's kind of an interesting, dawning or epiphany during our conversation here. So something different.
No,
so,
hey, it's why these conversations are valuable.
Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. And I think, and I love watching, someone in your position, because this is something that I grew up in. And I love watching, that why did you choose to stay, or what was attractive to you, and what helps make you move forward. So it's great to hear these kinds of stories for sure. Yeah. One of the things, if I could dive into a little bit, is you had mentioned in an article that I blatantly read and stole from, which, Tom's a good friend, so I think he'd be okay with it. But you had talked about splitting customer service from inside sales. And I think this is something that a lot of companies, a lot of distributors blend, and they don't really know what to call it. I think that's a really confusing area for them, but you all have really defined it. So could you tell me a little bit about that, what you all did?
Yeah. So the quick background on that is that we were very much like everyone in that it was sort of a muddy position, in that customer service and inside sales for my entire time, decades, operated in the same space. And it kind of fell into some of the thinking that goes along with, if you're trying to be great at everything, you're really great at nothing. And it also coincided with us really looking at the business as inside of the house and outside of the house. And we still have field representation, and we still have people that are moving out of the business around in the market all the time. And then you have this inside operational group that is making the sales that they're acquiring and is actually getting that produced and put out. But there's that bridge. And so customer service and inside sales was always that bridge. And as we started to try to create a strong bridge between inside and outside of the house, we were realizing that we needed to make both pieces great. So there's a lot of emphasis on, do our customers need a body in front of them? Do they need a sales rep in front of them? There's been a lot of things written about it, a lot of podcasts, a lot of conversation. And sure, we're paying attention to that, and we're putting our own spin on that, because that's to fit within your culture.
For sure.
But for us to do that, we had to find people that were focused on that. So to ask them to focus on that and to take care of all of the traditional customer service side, it was stretching them in areas that we didn't want them to be stretched in. And so we looked at the people who were on the bus, and we looked at the seats that were on the bus, and we said, maybe we need to create some new seats and move some people around. And so really it boils down to, we want people to be focused on inside sales. which we see in distribution as part of the future, being those inside experts and those people who can be communicators and advocates for the customer. But that doesn't necessarily fall under the same role of those who are answering phone calls and keeping communication flowing and coordinating all of the operational pieces in order to make sure that we know where is this tool repair and where is this order and can I get a tracking number and all of those pieces. So they're really separate roles. And we wanted people to be experts in both. And so we split that out. I'm sure there's things that I'm not fully developing and as far as the journey, but really that was the focus for us. It was that we wanted inside of the house, outside of the house to have a clean bridge. Both roles live on that bridge, but they have different focuses. And so we took that and split them so that they could really be good at what we needed them to be good at.
You know, it's interesting, and I appreciate that the customer service position. Often we have asked people who are really customer service focused. They love to make sure a customer is happy. They love to make sure the logistical side works right. You know, deliveries happen, all of that, and they're really adept at handling either negative feedback or they're adept at that. But when sometimes you would ask them, hey, could you make these calls on these dormant accounts? Could you reach out to them? That was tough, and it was such a barrier for them. So no, I can appreciate that it's not necessarily in their makeup, that is just not an area where they feel comfortable or want to feel comfortable. So no, I can appreciate the splitting of those two relationships there, or those two functions there, because it really, and then you will find those who are phenomenal. They can sell on the phone.
Yep.
They're really good at it. And that's, again, very different than an outside salesperson, who really hates being trapped in the four walls and they're like a caged animal. So I think there is a really good opportunity for different roles there.
Yeah, and I think you also can't understate the advantages of technology that make that possible. As distributors, we're always very conscious of headcount and overhead. And so as technology has allowed us on the quote unquote inside of the house roles to be maybe a little more lean, we can reallocate those resources to potentially greater return in that inside sales or into that customer service. So as we kind of lowered headcount in your typical like HR and accounting and places like that, it created opportunities for us to add headcount in other areas and not feel like we were overburdening the house, if you will.
Yeah, definitely. No, that makes a lot of sense. And, there's, I've never really hid my bias towards inside sales. I've always believed, and this is, going back into my 20s, I've always believed, I've always been disappointed in that the outside sales position has been this omnipotent position inside of a distributorship, because I've always believed that, just by sheer number of contacts in a day, there's no comparison. An outside salesperson might make 10, customer contacts in a day, whereas an inside salesperson could, literally do 30. And I've just always challenged that notion of which one, should be more valued. But as with age comes wisdom and some, dialing it back. But no, I think you're definitely onto something too, again, with the technology ability and actually the forced technology that we had in this last year.
For sure.
That role of an inside sales contact and an inside sales person who can really, do well over the video conference.
Right.
I think there's a tremendous ability for expansion there. I really do.
Yeah, and for us even, this is fully vetted in a sense that it's maybe only slightly over a year old at this point.
Right.
And we're judging and we're measuring and we're saying, okay, is this working? We're tweaking strategies. We're tweaking how much on the phone, how much over email, how much over video conference. And I think, again, just being willing to learn and to grow and to change, it's going to end in success. So,
do you find that there is more of a fear-based conflict with the outside salespeople? I mean, are they a traditional, feet on the street type of people who love that, the thrill of the kill, out, right face to face? Do you find that there is a little bit of, I don't know if fear is the right word, but a little conflict with this, a little confusion as to, which way is the company going to be going?
Sure. No, we've definitely had to walk through those waters of No, this is not a long-term move to eliminate you. This is not a long-term move to take money out of your pocket. I mean, those are all the kind of conversations that came up, and it's not been easy. Those conversations are not always easy, but we feel that with our team, we've gotten to the point where they understand that this is to the benefit of the business. It's the benefit of the business as a whole. And when the business improves, it makes all of us stronger. It gives us greater buying power. It gives us a better reputation in the market. And a lot of times it creates opportunities. You know, inside sales is really only effective up to a certain point within a matter of expertise, or if you get to the point where you've got to get out and you've got to do some machinery demonstration, or you've got to do some sort of a technical application on site, you know, it very quickly shifts from an inside account to a field account. And that then creates conflict the other way. You know, now you're going to the inside sales rep and you're saying, I'm taking this account that you worked and developed and I'm giving it to so-and-so. But we've worked hard on creating a team environment. It's not, especially in COVID, it hasn't been easy because it's been over video. But as we're starting to find ways to get together and in person again, it's recreating some of those bonds that have been maybe forgotten or have just gotten weak with distance. And we're committed to it. We're not going to walk away from it. And I do think that we're going to see it growing in our market, especially in distribution. So.
No, I would agree with you that I think it's trying to find the balance between the two of them and really not being afraid of those challenging situations. You know, there are going to be challenging conversations and there are going to be people who, well, they don't necessarily agree with your direction, you know, and I hate to say it, that's what the boss gets to deal with. You know, you get to deal with that kind of stuff. But yeah, coming to that point of balance and I guess coming to the acceptance that not everybody's going to be happy with it. Yeah, that's the other part of it.
You can't lead anything very long without realizing that you're not going to make everybody happy. So if you can't deal with that, leading a business is not for you. Right.
You better find another vocation. Yeah, absolutely. But, you know, I think that, you know, this is something that we are maybe kind of beginning down that journey on, this role definition, the defining of that. And I still believe that there is a place for both. I don't believe that one is going to get, a lot of people want to say there's, you know, the death of the outside salesperson. And I just don't buy that. I really don't. I mean, there's just too much value there.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think even those, and I have several in the industry that I respect greatly who have read the book, I think, that you're referring to, and that points to the death of the outside sales rep. And even in those businesses where, man, they have implemented that and they have read it back and forth, 100 times, they still have high-performing field teams. I think what that thinking and that philosophy points to is properly defining the value proposition. Mm-hmm. When is it appropriate to bring a very expensive resource to the table in a field rep versus when is it appropriate to have a resource that, let's be frank, it's a fixed overhead type situation in an inside sales role. It's leveraging the assets that are already in place. And typically, because of all of that, it's a lower, to the ownership, to the business, it's a lower cost solution. So it forces us as business owners to look and say, how do I value my allocation of the human resource?
Right.
And some of that's forced some hard conversations. It's like, I'm sorry, Mr. Sales Rep, I know that you've known these folks for 15 years, but they don't generate enough gross margin dollars to justify your time. Feel free to stop in once or twice a year because you have that relationship, but we're going to move that account to an inside sales rep. And you have to be willing to do that. And you try to do it with a hug and a virtual hug.
Right.
And a pat on the back versus a hard line, but it's good.
Well, again, I think that if you kind of define some parameters, that the more we define some parameters and guidelines, then the easier those conversations become. It's rather, nobody likes to get things sprung on them. So, when you can give those parameters and say, this is kind of what qualifies, the type of account that qualifies for outside sales representation. And this is the either geography, product mix, and frankly, margin dollars, then I think that those conversations become easier. But when when it's, you've got your cards to the vest and it's the secret, behind the curtain type of decision, then you're going to run into conflict. So transparency and relationships with, and making sure that those salespeople believe that you are working in their best interests.
Correct.
Yeah.
We've started doing on the beginning of every month, we actually bring the whole team together and they bring all of their open prospects sort of to the table, and they work as a team, and we call it, my director of sales just calls it a prospect qualification day. They go back through those prospects and they actually do a little more digging, and there's a little more scripted follow-up, and we determine whether or not those should stay with the field team or if they should be moved to the inside team, and vice versa. Okay. The prospects that the inside team is working on are then qualified, and do they need to be teed up for the field team, or do they stay within the inside team? And so even that little exercise, to your point on parameters, has helped everyone become familiar with the parameters, as well as to do it together. So now it's no longer, like you said also, it's not behind the curtain, but it's out in the open, and they're able to kind of work through it together. And anytime you can work through things together, I think you build some good bonds and you build some momentum.
Absolutely. No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And I think a lot of folks struggle with that communication piece, or the formalization of that communication piece. And I'm really a huge believer, and I hear it in a lot of different relationships that I run into, in these businesses, that the more formalization, because I know, like, for example, even just sales meetings, that people kind of quasi, they're like, we kind of do it once a month, or we'll do it maybe every other week, but they haven't made it this is something that we do. They haven't made it part of that culture. And I truly believe in, I'm not a huge advocate of more meetings, trust me.
Sure,
I'm not,
for sure.
I'm not a meeting junkie, but I do believe that the structure is really something that will help that relationship and help everyone kind of feel comfortable that their needs are going to be met going forward.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm really proud of my director of sales. She's been in her seat now just shy of a year and been with the company for a while, and has built a very nice rhythm where pretty much every week virtually they're having a sales discussion with a combination of a vendor making some sort of a presentation or just being the facilitator of a conversation, and then having open forum time, and just having that ability as a sales team for them to have their voices heard and to be heard as a group has been very important. I think we take for granted, especially the fact that they're out and about, and most of the time, even if you're in inside sales, you're sort of isolated, and to be made to feel as part of a group and part of the team, those have really helped change the attitude and the approach within that group. We still face challenges, the supply chain challenges of our world, and
absolutely,
and all of the different things that pop up. Those don't go away, but it's created more of a positivity and a collective effort to overcome those things.
Great. If you wouldn't mind, I want to change gears here for a little bit and talk about another area of really your business and really the relationships that you have to create out there. And that's with the trade groups that you all are involved with. Not only the I don't know if I like the word buying groups, but buying groups tends to be the word of the day sometimes, but those relationships, but then also, your SAFTA relationship. One of the questions that came up for me was with the SAFTA group, it's kind of like, well, that's the overarching, trade group, and you're going to fall into that channel. So that decision was almost made for you. But if you look at these, marketing groups or buying groups, that was a choice. That was a conscious choice as to, who you went with or how you went with those. Was that prior to you, or is that something that when you were involved with the organization that you joined these?
No, it is a good question. That is something that I have done in my time with the business. So we were members of a group called AFLink, which is not a construction-based the article we were talking about earlier came out of Construction Magazine, but more of a packaging-based group. And we were involved in that as I came into the business. And the Sphere One organization was also a group that we joined under my direction. And you are right. Those are choices. And I would go so far as to not necessarily challenge your statement on STAFTA, but to maybe expand on that. I think even in a group like STAFTA, you have choices. How much do you plug in? How much do you seek out the resources that they provide? But you are correct. There's not as much quote unquote choice there. It's not like you're going to go join a different trade association.
Right. Then again, there are, the paper, since you're down that, the paper side, you could go industrialist and put your resources there. But I guess my question was really, there are a couple different choices, for example, against Sphere One, you've got a couple other groups that are similar in structure, they all have their nuances, but why Sphere One? Just out of curiosity. Why choose that one?
Yeah, so I'd have to kind of go back a little bit. So it's tied into my experience with AFLink. So when I came into the business, I started running the warehouse. I ran the logistics side and moved from that into a sales role. And then as I was selling, I was always finding these add-on items at our customers. I was selling our core, but then I was looking for more.
Okay.
And that led me into a quasi-purchasing buyer role in our business. And so that is what made me sort of discover AFLink.
Okay.
AFLink to our business at the time, this is probably 06, 07, was just a buying group. And we just looked at it for the rebate dollars that were coming back to us.
Sure.
And I said, well, hold on a second. That's a lot of money coming back into the business. Don't you think we should understand who they are? Because I was talking to people.
Why would we do something silly like that?
And why are we getting money from them and we don't even know who these people are? There was not an attitude of being involved in those groups. Everybody in the business was sort of just like, we submit our purchase orders and we get money back. It's great.
Great checks. Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, awesome.
So I said, well, perhaps if we plug into what makes them tick, we'll find a way to maximize that. And that was my initial intent. And so I started to plug in. And I'll never forget, I think it was 2007, I went to the first AFLink Summit. And it was their big gathering and all the manufacturers are there and there's hundreds of distributors there and all of their people, because they're their own corporate entity that sits in the middle. And I said, this is what I have been looking for. It was a group of people with a similar mentality of we want to help each other grow and succeed in business. And while you could get that doing more of the STAFTA model, if you will, of doing a trade show, and then if you want to engage, you can engage, they created an environment where there was a little bit of forced engagement, and that engagement was exactly what a distributor needs. And I think it's what a manufacturer needs. They get that voice of the customer, and then you start to build relationships. And so that set an appetite, if you will, for what else I looked for. And I realized pretty quickly, AFLink was in the packaging side of our world and in some other spaces where we haven't expanded yet. And as the years have gone on, I started looking for an equivalent type group to AFLink in the other markets that we served. And so that search is what led me to Sphere One. What I liked about AFLink was, and what I still do, I'm on the advisory board of AFLink. What I still firmly believe is the value that AFLink provides is a strong base in education and in bringing tools to the distributor that we typically don't have in and of ourselves. And so they've spent a lot of resources and they put a lot of money behind helping distributors in the web presence and in the e-commerce presence, in marketing and social media, in some areas where I'm maybe not as well versed, but government contracts and pieces like that, where they bring resources to the table. And then they create a culture that creates friendship and relationship between both the manufacturer and the distributor, but also between the actual corporate entity of AFLink and both of those. So there's really a triangle effect that is going on, 3 strands, if you will, and it creates a very strong bond driven by the organization, but still with the distributor and the manufacturer at the core. And so I started looking for, like I said, for that equivalent, and reaching out to Mike Schumard at Sphere One versus some of their competitors, that became very clear that there was a very similar culture with Sphere One, where they tried to not just be an entity where it was about rebate dollars, but they brought more value to both the distributor and the manufacturer partners. And so that's what led me down that road. And, it was an answer to prayer. I was like, this is what I've been looking for, the core of our business. And it's been a great decision.
Andrew, I really like one of the things you mentioned is that when you kind of discovered Afflink and what it was available to you, it was outside the blocking and tackling of the distribution business. It was those things, as you said, you're not as well versed in. And it was that exposure. And I think you're really going into these relationships kind of with a sense of awe, that I don't know everything. And
Right.
I really want to be a sponge. There's some people that are freely offering this to me. Why wouldn't I take advantage of that? Why wouldn't I expand myself just a little bit?
You've just kind of hit the proverbial nail on the head with that. When I look at myself in a lot of ways, sometimes when I have self-reflection, I don't feel like I'm great at anything. And so I love finding people that are really good at things and they really care about things. And when we can build strong relationships and support each other and we can find ways to bring value to each other, then I want to put together a team with the people who are the best at what they love doing. And so when I find, like you said, when I find an organization that says, hey, we cater to your business and we want you to be part of our group, that's what it's all about. And then when you can take that same mentality and you take it into your recruiting and you take that into your networking, I could go long-winded on that, but I can't speak highly enough of. It comes back to that humility again of
Right.
like, what? I just don't know. I just don't know what I don't know. And I also know that I'm not very good at what I do know. So when I find somebody that is really good at it, it gets me really jazzed up. And I love to learn about their world. And I love to try to find out how we can work together. And when you come to people with that, they want to help. And it turns into a really good thing.
And this is one of the reasons I love, again, privately held family businesses is people want to help each other. And
Exactly.
Sure, they might compete out on the floor every once in a while, but ultimately, I think a lot of us just want to help make sure that other people are doing okay, and that's one of the things it's always attracted me to this privately held family business model is that genuinely people watch out for each other, and they will share. They're open about things. And I think it's very interesting, some of the things that you just shared about, with the Afflink and then also the Sphere One, relationship. Now, getting staff to, you said, you kind of challenged me and said that, there is more to it there, into that trade association. I think sometimes people look at trade associations as stodgy and not providing as much value there. So tell me, what do you see there that maybe I'm missing or others might miss?
Sure. I can't tell you how many times in my life where those that have been leaders over me have said, look, you're going to get out of this what you put into it, whether that's physical fitness, whether that's, raising your children, whether that's, the list could go on and on. It can get pretty deep pretty fast. And so for me, it was like, if I'm going to spend time, if I'm going to pay to go to a location, spend time, then maximizing this is my job while I'm here. And as a business owner, that means building relationships. That means seeing the value in the little interactions. That means, if it means, walking up to Georgia Foley, who's the executive director of Afflink, and saying, hey, what else can I do to be really involved? That's what it takes. And so for me, it doesn't always mean that you're going to get onto the staff to board or something like that. In this case, it did for me, but it leads to that same, all you're doing is you're showing that same openness and willingness to help, like we just talked about. And it's just at a slightly different level. And it's sometimes cased in what is perceived, and I agree, is perceived as a little bit maybe dated or stodgy. Mm-hmm. But you know what? Let it be dated and stodgy and get to the people that are behind it. Because those people are not dated and stodgy. Those people are real people with real experience and real knowledge, and they just want to help. And that's been my experience. I mean, the trade shows can be overwhelming. You put miles and miles and miles on your feet, and you just talk until you can't talk. But if you do that and you keep looking for that, searching for that value, you find it.
And it is interesting, the greatest professional relationships that I've had over my career a lot of them came from my affiliation with that stodgy, that my relationship with staff. And I shouldn't keep saying stodgy. George is going to kill me for that. Yeah,
same here.
Go after me. But I think that, again, breaking that perception. And, I was always amazed at how people do not dig deeper into it and find that second layer in the organization. I remember years ago, there was a lending library, and I think that's that might be long gone or digitized or whatever it is now.
Sure.
But, this was like one of those things that it was the most underutilized, opportunities or benefits of that organization. And so again, nobody knows about this stuff, and I think that they really, if you want it, go dig in and find out what did you sign up for? What are you paying dues for?
Exactly.
Yeah.
The other thing they've got that I thought's pretty cool, they have a dead inventory page. Isn't that like the curse of every distribution company?
Yes, I remember that flyer, yes.
We all have dead inventory. Let's post it. Maybe we could find a place to move it.
Absolutely. Again, and people don't know about these things. It's like these secrets. And
right.
I think you're absolutely right. Getting involved and finding out, what does this place have to offer? How can I maximize not only my financial investment, but my investment in time.
Right.
If I'm showing up at these conventions and showing up at these events, how can I maximize that?
Right.
Because my time is valuable. I'm walking away from my company for a short period of time, but what else is there?
Right. Yeah. I was looking on, I can't remember who, it's one of the influencers, one of the current, I would say more celebrity style business people, but she was talking about how she maximizes every minute of every day. And I'll admit, I don't have that level of focus, but that level of strategic intent to really, I write in my journal a lot of mornings as part of my morning routine, and I keep a bookmark, and on that bookmark I have live deliberately, live intentionally. And so much of life passes over us. There's so many writers that talk about life passing over like a wave, and if we let it, it will.
Sure.
But if we can seize those moments to live deliberately and live intentionally, man, it captures back just that little bit more incremental value, that little more incremental reward to what we're investing in. That I keep it there. I read it every morning. It's important. It's important. I wish I was better at it, but I have the intent.
You have the intent. Well, I got to admit, Andrew, I couldn't find a better thing to end on than that right there. I think you just absolutely nailed it right there. That's a great, message to leave with everyone, that you're right. If you allow that wave to kind of roll over you, you're not going to get anything out of it but wet. I mean, that's really all.
Exactly right.
You're not getting anything but wet there. But if you live your life with intention, and again, going back to humility, I think that is such an important word to drive in and, remain open,
Amen.
open,
That's
absolutely.
Right.
So, well, Andrew, thank you so much for taking the time with me. This has been a fantastic conversation, my friend.
Oh, I've loved it every minute. Thank you so much for the opportunity to join you.
All right. I hope to see you soon. Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, consider hitting that subscribe button. Links to sponsors, products, and services mentioned during this episode can be found in the show description area on your podcast application or at www.distributiontalk.com. Distribution Talk is edited and mixed by Andrea Klunder and Edwin Ruiz at the Creative Imposter Studios. This episode was brought to you by my company, The Distribution Team. We are a consulting services firm dedicated to helping wholesale distribution clients remove barriers to profitability, generate wealth, and achieve personal goals. To learn more about how we can help your company succeed, check us out at www.thedistributionteam.com.